Our second guest here is Nanci Palacios, who is the organizing and membership director at Detention Watch Network, where she leads national strategies to end immigration detention and build the power of directly impacted communities. With over a decade of experience organizing across immigrant, undocumented, Black, and queer communities, Nanci brings both lived experience and strategic vision to the struggle for justice. Nanci Palacios, welcome.
Thank you, David, and thank you everyone for being on today. As David said, I am with Detention Watch Network, which is an organization that works to abolish detention. We believe that as long as there is detention, there will be facilitation of deportations. Families will be separated. And, you know, many of our loved ones, even a lot of clergy and people of faith in the community are seeing members in the community not wanting to attend things like their services, children being scared to go to schools, and people being willing to participate in everyday activities. We're seeing immigrants that are recent arrivals who came in through some form of legal process, like presenting themselves for asylum at the border or being paroled in, being impacted and those being stripped away and being put in cages. And we're seeing families that have been here 20, 30 years also impacted. And there is no one that is safe. We believe that while there's cages being built out, they will continue to fill them, right? And that the fewer detention centers that exist, and if we can abolish them, then we can reduce the amount of raids and the amount of arrests that happen in the community. So I am located in Florida. I've lived in Florida all my life. And I can tell you that the Florida that I live in now is not the Florida that I grew up in. And unfortunately, Florida has been the blueprint for the rest of the country. It is now one of the states that has deputized its local law enforcement to pretty much act like ICE. And our governor has made sure to amplify the MAGA message in this state and to pretty much say that Floridians are not welcome here. And with that, we have seen an increase of people being detained. There's not a particular trend on how they're being detained in their jobs or job sites or stuff like that. There have been incidents that have happened in that way. However, we've seen a lot of, state troopers pulling people over on major interstates and on major highways, pulling people over between 5 and 7 a.m. as work trucks are going to work. And that is how the majority of people, at least in Central Florida, are being impacted and taken to our local jails and then taken to local detention centers. And then most recently, as you may have heard on the news, is this open concentration camp in the Everglades that was opened overnight. That is also a blueprint that we should be paying close attention to. As I think it's a model that is being used to see if it could be opened up in other places. And, you know, with over $150 billion that have been allocated for mass detention and deportation in the last couple of months, that is only going to fuel an increase of more people being detained. And so just last week, there was an article that came out on the Washington Post that really laid out ICE's plan to increase more beds, right? And more people being detained, close to 110,000 people a year. And I think that should alarm all of us. If you already are not paying close attention to people being picked up in your communities by unidentified people and being kidnapped, you need to pay attention, because if it's not already where you have a detention center in your community, it's coming. And I think that one of the things that we have to pay close attention is like not just a detention center itself. However, they're using state prisons and prisons that have been closed in the past, buildings that have been repurposed to now turn them into concentration camps. They are using military bases, and then getting the National Guard to kind of be the guards in those areas with no oversight at all. And we know what happens when there's no oversight. We know what happens when people are held, right, um, against their liberty, right, and not being allowed to even have due process. And it's that many rights are being violated, and many families are being separated from their loved ones. And so at Detention Watch, we do run a lot of local campaigns to either stop detention centers from expanding or shutting down detentions that have centers that have opened in your area. And so I'll be dropping a set of links in the chat in a few minutes, where you can learn more around our Communities Not Cages campaign. And we believe that that is one of the ways that you can get involved, right? If you have a detention center in your community, or a threat of a detention center coming to your community, you can organize yourself to stop it. And you can say that there's better use for that funding, and not to be going to the caging of people and the detention of people, because like I said, no one is exempt. We have seen DACA recipients being picked up. We have seen green card holders. We have seen citizens being racially profiled. And that is what these policies and this funding that has passed is causing. It is causing an increased amount of racial profiling for Black and Brown families, and over policing. And it's even been very evident that they're targeting people who have been voiceful, right, against what is happening in the community. And so I think we all have an opportunity to truly make a decision around what side of history we want to be at in this moment. And my hope is that you will be on the side of history that says that we need to abolish ICE, because our families and our communities deserve more. And because there's better use, right, for funding in our communities. There's parks that need to be built. There's access to healthcare that needs to be placed. There's people who need homes. There's schools that need funding. There's so many other ways that we could be using our taxpayer dollars than it going to caging people and separating families from each other. And if you are a person of faith, or if you practice a faith, right, what does your faith call you to do in this moment? And what do you want to make sure that you leave as your legacy in this moment, when people were being snatched off your community, where you show up to school and the person whose parent is supposed to be there is not there, when your neighbor is no longer outside, right? Where you show up to work and that hardworking person who has shown up to work every single day is missing, and you don't know what happened. And so with that, I'll turn it back to you, David. I'm gonna be sharing some of those tools in the chat, and look forward to a conversation with you all on things that we can do together.